What's up guys, how you doing? Welcome to another video, and today we're talking again all about the Canon R7. I'm going to talk about why I think the Canon R7 could fit into our range as a professional camera. Earlier this year, rumours were rife about the Canon R7. It was rumoured that we were going to see that camera in 2021. Lately though, as rumours have kind of escalated a little bit more with the R3 and the R1, which is now rumoured to come next year, it's kind of gone quiet on the R7, and so realistically I suspect we're probably looking at an early 2022 release for the Canon R7. But just as I've been looking loads at all the different specs and the rumours for the R3, I thought, well actually, you know what, I can't forget about that Canon R7. We talked about it in a video a few videos back, and I was really excited by some of the things that that camera could give us. Now, before we get into the detail of all of that, I'm going to ask you guys to do the usual YouTube stuff for me. Hit that like button, helps me out loads and loads on my channel, and I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. It is crazy that we have hit 10,000 subscribers. I really can't believe it, and I really am genuinely so grateful to everybody who has taken the time to watch my videos, subscribe to my channel, and just kind of follow along and be part of this community, because that really is the bit that I enjoy the most about making these videos. So look, I could say thank you all day, but let's get into this, the Canon R7. So first of all, let's do a quick recap on what we know already. So the first thing is that we know that this is very likely to be the first crop sensor camera in the Canon R range. For a long time, the Canon 7D Mark II was one of the leading crop sensor cameras that Canon made, and was really popular, especially with wildlife, sports and action shooters. There were lots of rumours about the Canon 7D Mark III, and that never really materialised, and eventually Canon confirmed there was not going to be a 7D Mark III. That left people like myself, big fans of the 7D series, really upset about that. We had to crack on with our 1DXs or maybe our 90Ds and our R6s until the rumours surfaced that there was going to be a Canon R7, a mirrorless version of the 7D. Now specs wise, everything that we have heard about this are rumours, and we should stress that everything is still rumours, but there's some really interesting stuff in there. First of all, the sensor. There was a lot of talk about this, but it seems now that most of the information we are getting suggests that the sensor is going to be 32.5 megapixel sensor. People will have all different opinions about that. Some will say less, some will say it should be something different, but actually that doesn't sound bad to me. It sounds pretty good when you consider that the R6 is only a 20 megapixel sensor. Of course, there's a difference there with the full frame and the crop sensor. We won't go into that right now, that's a separate video. But of course, there is a bit of a difference there. But a 32.5 megapixel sensor on a crop sensor camera is not bad at all. We have to assume that's going to be a 1.6 crop factor. That's pretty much what Canon tend to go with. In terms of the autofocus, we have to assume that it is going to have most of the autofocus system from the Canon R6. Of course, there's lots of rumours about the autofocus system now in the Canon R3, the eye control, the fact it's got the automatic recognition now of vehicles and motorbikes. You have to assume that that kind of stuff won't be in the Canon R7, mostly because they will probably try to keep that price point down a little bit, and that will be difficult if they start adding too many features from the R3 into the R7 body. But nonetheless, the autofocus system on the R6 is fantastic, so if it's anything like that, I imagine it will be really good. It sounds that just like the 7D Mark II, it will be steered towards wildlife and action sports shooters. It sounds like it's going to be a fast camera, very likely to have the 20 frames per second if you're using the electronic shutter, just like the Canon R6. And I would imagine the mechanical shutter is probably going to be something similar, maybe in the kind of 12 frames per second range. But again, this is rumours at the moment. So with all of that, why do I think that the Canon R7 could be a professional camera? Well, I've got several reasons why. Number one is that the Canon 7D Mark II was very much a professional camera. Now, when I use the word professional, people tend to assume you're talking about the pro bodies, the 1DX, 1DX Mark II, the upcoming R3, and so on and so on. But that's not necessarily the case. Really, to me, a pro camera is something that has the capabilities of doing a professional job. And for me, the 7D Mark II did. I still use this now for my sports work, so I can't see why the R7 would be any different. I imagine if you have something like an R5 or an R6 or even an R3, and you wanted something like the R7 as a backup, I think that will definitely be good enough as a professional sports camera. For a good period of time, I shot a lot of pro sports with two 7D Mark IIs, so I don't see why I wouldn't be able to do that with two R7s if I wanted to. The second reason for me is going to be the price point. Now, I imagine the price is going to be pretty good. You have to assume it's going to be somewhere between like £1,500 to maybe £2,000 I'm talking about there. Mainly because when the 7D Mark II came out, I think it was just under £1,500. Of course, that was quite a few years ago now though. And bearing in mind now you can get the R6 for a little bit over £2,000 or somewhere between £2,500. So I imagine that R7 is going to be somewhere around like the 1,750, 1,800, something like that. When you consider how many thousands of pounds the R3 is going to be, or even the R1 in the future, people who are stretching their budget to get that camera and need something more affordable as that backup, the R7 becomes a really attractive option. What this then links into, and in fact the third thing for me, is it enables you to be a bit more versatile with your gear. With that crop factor and the extra theoretical reach, and I know it's theoretical reach and I've talked about that in a separate video too, but nonetheless that means if you paired that camera up with something like a 300mm lens, that's going to give you a really good field of view, real good range to shoot sports. Currently with my R6 I'm on a 400mm lens, and of course if I was able to downgrade and sell that 400mm lens, buy a 300mm lens, I'm going to be left with a good bit of money in between, some of which of course goes towards buying an R7, but actually that whole setup then becomes really affordable. Especially if you have something like the R6 or a full frame camera paired up on your 70-200 lens. To me, something like that, an R7 on a 300mm, an R6 on a 70-200, I could definitely imagine that being my setup for pro sports in the future. Moving into the performance aspect, well, I'm shooting pro sports now with the R6, and the speed of it and the autofocus systems and the electronic shutter, I know that's a bit controversial, but I do shoot a fair bit of sports with the electronic shutter and I think it's fine. It performs really, really well, and now we're hearing rumours that the R7 is going to be just as fast and have just as good an autofocus system as the R6. So you know what, if the R6 can do it, that means the R7 could do it too. And again, for me, reinforcing the idea that I think it could perform as a professional camera. Now the next bit, and the bit that everyone's going to be shouting at me, I know you guys are going to be whacking it in the comments, is so much of this will depend on the ISO performance. And in particular, the low light performance. That's something which was always a bit of a struggle with the 7D Mark II. And I say a bit of a struggle because I still use this for indoor sports, under floodlights, everything, and I get on fine with it. But the reality is it does not perform as well in a low light situation as something like the 1DX. The R6 is really, really good in low light, and you have to assume the R7 isn't going to perform on that same level. With any crop sensor camera, with the amount of pixels that they have to fit into that smaller sensor, that normally means that those pixels are then a bit smaller. They then have less capability of absorbing light because they are a smaller pixel, and that's why you struggle a bit more in a low light situation and you get a bit more noise in your photos. I think once we start to see real life examples of that and we start to really see how that performs in a low light situation, that will be make or break for me. But you know what? My suspicion is that it is going to be pretty good. Low light performance is improving all the time in crop sensor cameras, full frame cameras too, so actually I would be really surprised if it isn't pretty good. It's certainly going to be a lot better than the 7D Mark II was, and I used the 7D Mark II for pro sport, so I'm sure it will be good enough to shoot pro sports with. So I think that probably just about rounds us off. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, guys. What do you think about this? Do you think the R7 is going to be something that you're looking to get? I know I have a lot of followers of my channel who maybe shoot sports on a more amateur level, of like your family or kids or local sports. And you know what? That's fantastic. And something like the R7 could be so good for that. An affordable camera that with that crop factor you could put on like a 70-200, going to give you good reach, good performance, fast, good autofocus. I think that camera could be so good for so many of the people who I know follow my channel. And I'm really interested to hear what you think about that, especially you guys who perhaps haven't made that jump to mirrorless yet. Is this going to make you do that? Or maybe those of you like myself who are now using the R6 or maybe the R5, are you looking at that R3, or with the price point that it's maybe going to be, perhaps you're starting to think, you know what, I might hold on and see what that R7 looks like. I'm really interested to hear. As I said, let me know in the comments below. And I think that just about rounds us off. I'm off to reminisce with my 7D Mark II. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.